Hi, this is Stacy Hernandez with the Best You College Admissions Consulting, the best college for the best you. I'm here to interview Marianne Taylor. Her business is called Taylor the Gap, and she's a gap year advisor. And I wanted to interview her because we are broadcasting right now on May 20th, 2020 during the COVID pandemic. And so we're getting so many questions about this concept of gap year. And there's just so much talk about it. So I was like, I'm going to go to an expert. So I'm going to ask Marianne a couple of questions. But Marianne, to get started, can you tell us a little bit more about your background and your experience with gap years so families can better understand where you're coming from?
Thanks, Stacy, for having me. I am based in Boulder, and I myself am a veteran gapper way back in the medieval ages in 1974. I was really burnt out. I'd worked really hard. I was an overachiever, and I also wanted to learn a language. And I like to ski. So I went to the University of Grenoble for no credit because my college said no credit. I deferred. And then after college, I took 3 years and served in the Peace Corps and using my French in Senegal, West Africa. So I flanked my college years. And then throughout my adulthood, I've taken gap years, whether it be a gap experience volunteering with women's co-ops in Gisenyi, Rwanda, or Moshi, Tanzania, to taking an adult gap program last Peru with 6 other adults down in the Sacred Valley. And in addition, I am a parent of 4 gappers. They all did something different. They're now 22 to 31 years old. But my daughter went all the way through college, finished early, and then spent 4 months working as a preschool assistant in Kayalisha, which is a township out of Cape Town. So she did it on the far end. My son, who was quite young, who didn't work as hard as he should have in high school, really needed that extra year of maturity. He chose to work for his gap year. He worked in Moab for a rafting company. He taught snowboarding up in Keystone, Colorado. And then he worked in the service industry for 5 months. And he said, you know, Mom, I think I really need to go to college and get that degree. The best gift.
Mm-hmm.
And then my daughter, another daughter, she is interested in law school. So she spent her year after college again, working for a district attorney's office, researching for an attorney down in Cape Town, South Africa, and then learning Spanish in Peru for 6 weeks because she's interested in immigration law. And then my last child did a study abroad program. He went straight through college, but he did do a study abroad program. And so I think that kind of counts. So I bring the parenting perspective in as well as my own gap year experience. And finally, I bring in a social work background. I have a master's in social work, and that has been really useful. Oftentimes, between parent and child, there can be a certain amount of tension because one wants to take a gap program or do a gap year, and one of the parents may not, or the parents may think that Johnny needs to take a gap year, but Johnny's not on board. So I can act as a third party and really facilitate the conversation as well as the process in gap year planning. So that's a little bit about my background. And then about 10 years ago, I started this gap year business. I really felt like people could use some help in trying to plan out their experience, whether it be for a semester, whether it be for 4 weeks, whether it be an entire year. There are so many gap year options out there. If you Google it, it's just mind-boggling. And so I really serve as a guide, a coach, to really help students, whether they want to be more independent or they need more structure. I just work with them. I have it be very student-driven, but I work with them really to guide the process.
Amazing. And it's amazing the range that your children even went through, like locally, within the US, internationally, all different kinds of structures and different ways of getting these breaks, and the experiential piece behind it. Fascinating. I mean, it's just so important to get that. So we have a couple of questions, and so, okay. So one of the big ones is currently, what trends are you seeing currently? Are you seeing more people wanting to go on gap years for next year? So that would be the academic year of 2020, 2021.
So I saw about the same amount of interest in the gap year up until about March. So gap year fair season, I had about the same number of recruits. And then come March, when COVID hit, there was kind of this fall off.
Mhm.
And in part, I think seniors were trying to adjust to, online learning. And then they were adjusting to, I have to visit college virtually in April. And then, I'm not sure what my college might be offering. My first choice, it might be online, it might be in person, it might be a hybrid, they don't really know. So really, I've been receiving a lot of inquiries and kind of more testing the waters.
Mm.
What might a gap year program look like internationally, domestically, online? I've had a lot of interest that way, but not as much commitment. I think
Mhm.
with the uncertainty, which is just a reflection of our times, people are a little bit afraid to commit to paying for a gap year advisor,
Yeah.
to laying down that deposit for college because it has so many unknowns, as well as to committing to a gap year. And now that there's some deferral deadlines have been moved to June 1st and even some to July 15th, they're still kind of trying to have the conversation with their parents or with an advisor, just like, what are my options before I decide? And it's really hard, I think. I think 15% decline in college enrollment right now. And for students that came back from a gap year, had to leave their
Mhm.
country, if they were international, come back in March, they've been kind of twiddling their thumbs, although I've been trying to provide them some options. But they were looking forward to college. And then
Yeah.
suddenly that may be remote. So there's that piece as well. But we have seen overall about 145% increase in gap year inquiries at the Gap Year Association. So there's
Wow.
definitely been a trend of an uptick in interest.
Yeah. But you made such an important comment that no one's willing to really commit to anything yet.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to continue to see that throughout the summer.
Yeah.
And I know that colleges are making every effort to try to get kids back on campus, but that is it, but they're all talking hybrid models. They're all talking about a change in some way. It's not going to be the norm,
Right.
but what that looks like, even Cambridge University, or is it University of Cambridge? I think it's Cambridge University in the UK. They just announced today that they are officially, for the entire school year, they're not going to offer large lectures. So there's going to be online, but also small community-based work. And that is official. So the title or the headlines that are going around is Cambridge is fully online. That's not the case. They're trying to still get as many kids on campus as they can and back to school, but there's not going to be large lectures. It's going to be small. The California State University system is going online, at least for the first semester. So we're hearing a lot of this, and a lot of families are trying to make that choice, right? Whether to
back to back on that is these seniors that have been really disappointed not having prom and not having the faculty student kickball game, to the big milestone of graduation. So they've had that disappointment, and they've had this dream of throwing the Frisbee on the college quad and having the independence and the freedom that you gain when you go to college. And suddenly that might not be there for them. So I think they're grappling with so many disappointments, and they're, I think uncertain about, okay, if I don't go to college and I take a gap year, is it going to be international? Can I do something domestically? Can I do something locally? Can I do something in my house if I have to be online again? So those are all the questions that they're all grappling with.
Yeah. Yep. And it's a wait and see in a lot of ways. So as you are starting to kind of advise families and students around this idea of gap years, like what kind of gap year experiences are you seeing as an option in our current situation?
So I meet weekly with a group of gap year providers, as well as the gap year advisors, as well as often some risk mitigation experts with the Gap Year Association hosting these. And every week, because COVID is changing rapidly and every day it seems to be a different scenario, every week we are hearing the different modifications that gap year programs are making. And as I mentioned just earlier, I kind of have put it in 4 different scenarios.
Yeah.
The worst case scenario, we'll call it Plan D, is if a student is restricted, you're sheltering in again back at home. So that it's mostly online. But there are so many now virtual online programs.
Yes.
I just learned of one today where you can work with women's groups down in Guatemala, Oye Te Tambo, where you can work on fair trade, but you can do it virtually from your home. Or you could do a coding class, or you could do Google certifications. So it doesn't look as bleak as, oh, more on remote classes. There are lots of different options that you can do at home. The second place kind of scenario is having to stay within your own state. Now, we all have to admit it's not bad being in Colorado.
We're lucky.
Whether it be in Paonia, there's a great program there, or maybe, up in the Rocky Mountains. There's so many wilderness programs. And I have a whole list of volunteer options, whether they be local in Boulder or Denver or wherever. But, that's the second case scenario where we have to shelter in within our own state. The third case scenario would be where we're able to go throughout the United States, and Alaska and Hawaii, and maybe even the Bahamas, U.S. Virgin Islands as well. I've included that. And there are a number of different exciting programs that I have uncovered because I've had to really look at U.S. domestic options. This internship program in San Francisco, where you learn some life skills, some resume building, you do an internship locally. There's a similar one offered in Nashville. There are national park service work with American conservation experience. There's a cooking course in Boulder. There's woodworking in Maine. There's all sorts of opportunities in the US. And I have been really excited just to kind of discover what those are, because before, everybody's orientation and focus has been international. Yeah. And then plan A, the very best case scenario, is that COVID disappears, we eradicate it, or we get consistent testing and tracing and or a vaccine, so that international travel comes back into play. So that the programs that were scheduled for September, you can now fly off to Bhutan or Nepal or New Zealand. That's the best case scenario. And even in those programs, they've been modifying them. So they might be doing a later start. Instead of leaving in September, they might be leaving in October to give COVID a little bit more time to kind of fade out, or at least have the curves be flattened. They may be reducing it to 2 months instead of 3. They may be modifying it to just one country, where formerly they traveled to 3 or 4, because many of the programs were caught with border closures back in March when they were trying to evacuate and get the kids home. So just one country, so they don't have to deal with the border crossings. But a lot of programs still are waiting till mid-July to make that decision. Some are coming up with domestic programs. I know of one that's coming up with a program in Hawaii, a program in Northwest United States, a wilderness program, and one in Montana. So that's going to be their backup. That's kind of their plan B if people can't go to Southeast Asia or wherever. So international programs are working very, very hard, and most have a COVID-19 policy. They're being extremely flexible about deposit and program refunds. Some you can get a full refund up until the day before. It's quite remarkable.
Wow.
So that's a little bit about what's going on in the gap year world.
Yes, thank you. So to wrap up, do you have any tips for parents and students right now in terms of, just from everything you have seen going on over the last few months, any tips you can think of, anything else you want to comment on or say before we really start wrapping up? Just think everyone is just kind of lost, or, or just like waiting in limbo.
Right. One thing would be not to put 2 deposits down.
Good.
To 2 colleges, just
good.
Unethical.
Thank you.
Yes. And I have seen that. I've always advised against that. It's unethical, and they talk to one another, as we well know. But also not to put 2 deposits on 2 gap year programs. It's not fair. If you're unsure, work with an advisor.
Yes.
I really try to tailor the gap year according to the students' interests and their passions and what their goals are. What's their why? What do they want to get out of the gap year? And even if they have this great hope to go to Vietnam, Cambodia, we can modify that. There are some excellent programs and opportunities, experiential learning right here in America. So for students not to become disheartened, to not give up the idea of a gap year just because it may not be international. It may be that we do something domestic here in the fall, but you have that opportunity in February or late January to go international. So all is not lost. That may be a more promising time. But just for people to really explore the gap year as an option, we have found that kids that take a gap year have a higher GPA, throughout their 4 years in college, and they graduate in 4 years instead of the national average, which is 6. So a gap year is so beneficial in terms of maturity, in terms of going to college with a better focus, a better purpose about what they want to study, and they are much more able to navigate those social decisions with the newfound freedom. So there's lots of benefits to a gap year.
Yes, yes, I'm so with you on all of that. Well, thank you so much. I will, when I post this video, I'll also send you Marianne's website so you can see all of her resources and learn more about her services. So again, thank you so much for your time. Again, this is Stacy Hernandez with the Best You College Admissions Consulting.